Could Microsoft could Microsoft add generic versions of their original Xbox and Xbox 360 emulator applications to allow the users to play unapproved games from a disc to get around licensing issues? Why don't you think Sony has opted for disc-based backwards compatibility like Xbox has? That's kind of a separate question. John?
Well, because the reason those licensing issues exist is because it has to wrap itself in some sort of a virtual machine to even work in the first place. Like, I don't think there's a way for them to...
For 360 at least, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't think there's a way for them to actually, like, read the game disc like the Xbox 360 did and still do the emulation side based on how it's built anyway. They would have to fundamentally alter the way the emulator works.
They repackaged it basically.
That's the problem, is that they repackage all the games to make it work.
Basically what you get, the disc is essentially a key, and you put it into your Xbox, and it basically downloads a repackaged version with an x86 executable. So maybe there are other ways forward via emulation.
Yeah, they're not able to natively run the game off the disc. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, there was a story recently about the OG Xbox emulator on Xbox One being the Xbox 360 OG Xbox emulator running under backwards compatibility. I'm not sure the extent to which that is true, because that OG Xbox emulator seemed to have quite a lot of issues back in the day.
I mean, they could have continued to improve it.
Guess so,
And for one, I mean, original Xbox stuff runs in high res now.
Yeah.
Which that old emulator really didn't do. Like, it claimed to put anti-aliasing and stuff in, but it was still running the games.
That could all be done at like the DirectX level, though.
That's true. That's true. So,
Alex, any thoughts?
If that's the case, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. I see what Oliver covers on the channel and recently the iOS stuff. I think maybe for OG Xbox, it's more doable than it is for Xbox 360 for the reason that John just outlined. I'd like to see it. Phil has said before that he looks at emulation in a positive light, about like creating some sort of store maybe for it. That's kind of what it sounded like to me. Yeah, I'd like to see it.
I don't think it avoids the licensing issues. It seems to me, John, that Phil's talking more now about PC versions as the kind of game preservation vehicle that he prefers.
Exactly. But I do think, there's no reason they couldn't. The license issue is only an issue because of the repackaging. If they could find a way to just run direct from disk, the license issue would go away, because that's traditionally how the disk-based backwards compatibilities worked on every other platform.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you didn't have this issue on any of the Nintendo platforms or prior PlayStations up until the 3, which I guess brings in that second question about why do you think Sony hasn't opted for it? That's a really good question. And I would also like to know the answer to this. I think part of it is that their compatibility is probably, for PS2, I think the compatibility of their emulator is probably not good enough. And they don't want the situation where people are just trying to insert all kinds of random discs that don't work, maybe. For PS1, though, I maybe it's just like, oh, these games are too old, blah, 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 blah. Like, I really don't know why, because there's no technical reason why that wouldn't be possible.
Yeah.
And like for years, there was this line of thinking that, oh, the PS4 can't read CDs. The laser doesn't read CDs. That's a bunch of bull. That's not true.
Really?
Yeah, with hacked PS4, guess what? You can read CDs. You can play emulated PS1 games off a disc on a PS4.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
It has none of that's not a limitation, so they just didn't do it, basically. And I don't know. I agree. I think that sucks, because that was Sony's MO for years up until the PS3.
Yeah.
Right?
That wouldn't solve the PS3 problem more generally, which is that there's just not an emulator that could run on a PS5 fast enough that we know of.
I think with PS3, if they were to do it, it would just have to be specific games, because as we know, like I think I've said before, games that don't rely heavily on like SPUs, for instance.
Yeah, be fine.
Ridge Racer, you can run that on a Steam Deck, and it's pretty good. But anything that's like SPU heavy pushes even like the most powerful PC CPUs to the limits, right? Those would not work on a PS5.